We have a big panel to break all of this down, but we're going to begin with MS Now legal affairs reporter Fallon Gallagher. She's outside of the Supreme Court. MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin and former federal prosecutor Temidayo Agenga-Williams and immigration attorney Alan Orr is with us as well. It's great to have all of you guys. Fallon, you're there in front of the Supreme Court. I'm going to go to you first to break down what this ruling on temporary protected status means.
Yeah, Antonia, this is the worst case scenario for TPS recipients. The Supreme Court here today is clearing the way for the Trump administration to end the temporary protected status for more than 350,000 Haitians and Syrians. And I want to remind you that these are not people who came here illegally. These are people who are here under a protected immigration status because it is unsafe for them to live in their home countries. Now, this is a 6-3 ruling along ideological lines. Alito wrote the majority, Kagan wrote the dissent. And basically what they're saying here is that there is no judicial review for the terminations of non-constitutional claims. Now, that means that the court actually can't decide. There's no role for the court to decide if the Trump administration can terminate these types of claims or not. But there was one constitutional claim in this case, and these TPS recipients argued that the Trump administration was trying to terminate these programs on racial grounds. Now, they pointed to statements that the president had made about Haitians, that then Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem had made. And the court is saying that because the Trump administration has reviewed every single termination that has come up thus far, there is no racial ground. But I want to read very briefly from this ruling because Justice Alito writes in the majority, viewing all relevant evidence, we conclude that MIO respondents are unlikely to prove that race was a motivating factor in the decision to terminate Haiti's TPS designation. It follows that they are not entitled to interim relief on their equal protection claim. Now, of course, they're pointing to those statements, those racially motivated statements that the president had made about Haitians in Ohio. You'll remember that whole saga about eating pets. They're saying that that doesn't count here because there is no clear racial motivation by the Trump administration. But again, this is a major, major blow to those TPS recipients from Haiti and Syria. There's more than 350,000 of those people here, but there are more than 1 million people here on TPS status overall. So this is going to have massive implications. Antonia?
Alan, I want your reaction to what Fallon just laid out for us there and the concept here that the court is ignoring the history of this administration's remarks about Haitian people in particular. I don't think there is a single American who can say they actually forget what we heard from the president, what we heard from Vice President Vance about Haitian people, just some of the most disgusting and racist remarks you can imagine. I know that you work with a number of Haitian clients. Break down for me just how devastating all of this is about to be.
Very devastating, and I hope we stop talking about it as the Trump administration won or someone won, because right now America lost. There are going to be a lot of jobs that are open and a lot of people in home health care industries that are not going to receive any service because their providers are going to be removed from the United States. There are a lot of people who are going to die and suffer because of the account of this. So I wish this court was more of a court of equity than they say they were a court of policy right now. So I am the chair of the Haitian Bridge Alliance, which is the United States organization that represents these Haitians before the Supreme Court. And we have made the argument that not just his comments, but also in the writings and just recently even the discovered emails from Kristi Noem about the clear conversations they've made about Haitians and Black immigrants in general, when you even look at the refugee policy. And this court has said, even with that information, there's nothing for us to do here, which seems to be extremely problematic along party lines. And today you've seen something that I haven't seen in the Supreme Court in a very long time, is that you've seen the justice sort of read dissents that are 35 pages from the bar. So even in the Supreme Court, you see not the harmony that generally exists there in peaceful dissent in saying that this is outside the norm. And because it is outside the norm, because it isn't about just policy and procedure, this is about people and human engagement. And the concept that people keep saying that the problem is that it's temporary status and it's been longer than temporary, well, change the word. Don't put people's lives in danger because you feel that that arbitrarily moves something. And as stated before, there are a million so classes of TPS individuals who are here legally working. So they're authorized, they've been vetted. There's none of the concerns that you have with people who may come in undocumented, as well as they're supporting our economy. And when you remove those individuals, you draw down all of those work areas. So all those jobs they're doing, all of these companies that were relying on these TPS workers to work tomorrow are going to have to make decisions about them leaving today. So this is not a big win that we think we're going to celebrate. And there are 350 million or more Americans in the United States. A million TPS holders are not causing some economic burden on the United States.
Temidayo, Justice Elena Kagan said this. She said the evidence is there plain to see in the president's statements, which the majority, and for that matter, his own lawyers, cannot even bear to repeat.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so interesting about that is how the court basically pretends that the president is not the leader of this administration, that the actions the executive branch takes here don't reflect his intent and the racial animus that you see there. And I think what's most alarming to me is the continued basically shift away from accountability for the executive and a concentration of power in the executive. You now have a judiciary that effectively says that the administrative state, you don't have to abide by the rules the Congress sets. So Congress' congressional power is now limited there. You have a judiciary that's not going to review what the executive branch does, including the racial animus that you see there. And what's left is an executive branch that is completely untethered from the rule of law and process. Right. I know there's a lot of discussion about the politics here and the implications on real people. All that is very important. But there's a process here that Congress laid out that represents us, that passed laws, and there should be this expansion of no judicial review, I think, is a part of a trend here that we're seeing, where the executive branch is allowed to act without any review from any other branch, judicial or congressional, and that's really dangerous.
Lisa, I wonder if you can build on that and the origins of this case in the first place. Because from the outside, or really not the outside, as someone who covers immigration, it appeared to very literally emerge just out of the president's own interests and whims.
I think there's some truth to that, Antonia, particularly when you terminate temporary protected status for any country, there is a process that Temidayo was referring to that's supposed to be followed. There's supposed to be some consultation between a number of agencies within the agency itself. You would expect to see a very well-considered administrative record, right, of people discussing whether this is or is not in the national interest to extend TPS for a particular country. And you didn't see that here. And the reason you didn't see that here is because among the president's comments about the countries at issue here were also some antipathy toward the very idea of temporary protected status for anyone. And unfortunately, the majority here sort of turns that on its head to justify those actions. They say, no, 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 no. This president's not a racist. Don't look at the actual comments that he made, which they say are not overtly racial, and I'll take issue with that. But beyond that, they say, this is a president who just didn't like TPS. He doesn't like immigration in general. This isn't about any particular group of immigrants. He doesn't have racial animus. He just doesn't like the whole enterprise and the liberal immigration policies of the people who came before him. And so they sort of operationalize Trump's own racism across groups, across TPS statuses, which, by the way, all of the TPS countries that exist in the United States right now, all of them are majority non-white countries. There isn't a Scandinavia country among them. There is not a majority white country among countries that we grant TPS to. So from the very outset, this is not sort of a fair comparison. We are not comparing apples and apples. This is an apples and oranges sort of comparison where all of the countries that have TPS are made up of people that this president has said again and again are not people that he likes. They're countries that he's called S-hole countries, right? This is a president who is basically made his whims and wishes known, and the Department of Homeland Security acted on them on a dime, as you suspected.
I'm so glad you spelled all that out, Lisa, because I've been thinking about this piece in the New York Times all week. A look inside the welcome bags planned for white South African refugees. This is by Hamid Ali-Aziz and Zolan Kano-Youngs from earlier this week. In the coming weeks, the United States plans to provide a welcome gift to white South Africans entering the United States as refugees. The piece describes how they're going to get welcome bags that include a report commissioned by Mr. Trump during his first term that downplays the role of slavery in the country's founding, and a children's book accusing South Africa's government of favoring the black population. They're also going to get tablets and other things. Alan, when you look at what's happening there, and you know what's happening in your clients' lives, you understand that there are people's lives actually at risk if they are sent back to Haiti or to Syria right now. What is the sort of the message this administration is sending?
Well, I think it sends a very clear message to no poor, no black, no disenfranchised immigrants can come here at this point in time. And that's with the gold card and everything else. The messages is that we're sort of promoting in our immigration policy that we only want the rich for some bizarre reason, when we've seen our history that many of the people who come in refugee status go on to create great companies. But I also want to add a little bit of solution here. It's time for Congress to stand up. This isn't the end of the road for Haitian nationals. There's a discharge petition that is right now in the Senate that has already passed the House that could be passed and send a clear message to the White House that they want these policies to push forward and protect this class of individuals for some period of time while we sort of sort out how we wind down or address these temporary protective statuses. But in the immigration world, even before this administration, it has been clear to be a Black immigrant, just like in society, sometimes you have the worst rigor. And as you've seen the countries and the bans, almost 70% of Africa is banned. African countries are banned from coming within the current policies of this administration right now for non-immigrant visas. The denials are higher. The same thing for the Caribbean when you start looking at our very near neighbors that are going through. Besides Congress stepping up, I also ask the world to step up, to be the leaders that the United States used to be. Canada has a solution. Mexico may have a solution. And other countries may step up and say, you know what? We're going to stand in the gap that the United States used to stand for and build our world around the great immigration policies that the United States wants to have diversity and power that the United States actually receives. It is shocking to me that yesterday Haiti ends their World Cup after being out of the whole World Cup for 52 years, making not only their first score, but 2 scores, but then the very next day it hits the population in such a strange and odd way.